So thank you for joining me today, Sheila, to discuss this project, our project. And it's about establishing the range of flexible learning approaches that institutions have adopted to provide opportunities for all. So it'd be really interesting to hear from your perspective. Could you tell me about strategies or policies for offering flexibility in time, place, or mode of delivery?
Janet, thank you very much indeed. I thought what I'd do, if it's okay, is just say a little bit about everything I'm going to talk about will actually be in reference to issues of social mobility and EDI, but I probably won't keep saying that. I'll be talking in fairly broad terms, but if we can just keep that as the background and context within which this discussion is taking place, then I hope it will make for a kind of wider discussion, if you like, but where that is always a relevant factor. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely great. Thank you. Yes.
So I think the first thing that occurred to me when I was reflecting on this question is the need to transfer our very traditional thinking and approaches to the whole issue about education delivery, to how we do that in a completely new, flexible mode. What is the learning experience like? And I think this is necessarily going to be an iterative process, because in a sense what we'll be doing is coming up with new ideas, trialing, testing, evaluating, going back to seeing whether it has actually met our initial objectives, and if it has, excellent. Has it exceeded it? Has it not met them? And I think that we have to be open to the fact that we may not have all the answers to delivering an amazing experience first time out, but that we continue to build, enhance, and grow. And I think in that light, I think historically we've probably looked at things like policies and guidance as being quite entrenched and quite embedded. And I think I'd like to have a more sort of free-flowing concept of how we develop and evolve policies and how we revisit them, a much more flexible, if you like, agile thought process and way of working to creating all of this. I'd like things to feel a lot more dynamic, if I'm honest, and I suspect our learners would as well.
That sounds fascinating. It's really about establishing a culture of like exploration and learning in strategy as well as in discipline level, but in strategy as well. So that sounds really exciting for the institution. Can you share your thoughts about strategies for developing learners' data literacy and their agency? It'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think this. I think when I was thinking about this particular question, I was not just thinking about the learners as we would conceive them, but I also decided that our staff were learners in this process, our academic colleagues and our professional services staff. So I think there is a real importance in ensuring that we keep abreast of developments. And we need to be not just keep abreast of them, we actually need to be highly competent in responding to those developments so that our learners are actually experiencing something that's relevant to the world that they operate in. And we need to think about how we apply those skills, both within the university and from the perspective of our learners' experience, and how that's going to land with their employers or industry or our partners. So I do think we're going to have to be a lot more fleet of foot of how do we genuinely keep on top of what is an incredibly fast-moving world where competition is rife. And I think it's a very different environmental context that we're now entering, which is exciting, but a little bit kind of it generates a level of sort of anxiety about we really need to be on top of this. I think we also need to feel that we should be able to continuously innovate, really to ensure that our offer and the learning that we provide is delivered and based on the needs of, for example, employers and other sectors. So I think we need to be much more cognizant of that. It's not just about what we're interested in delivering, as fascinating as that may be.
Yeah, so it's developing a sort of outward-looking approach to everything. Yeah, so looking out and yes, developing our awareness of our place in the world around us, in the community around us as well. Yeah.
Yes, and perhaps revisiting, it may well be that we have colleagues who are very much wedded to a particular aspect of their discipline, but perhaps to encourage them to see it in the context of the newer emerging world and not just from their own perspective. Um, and I think we need to look at having a variety of interactions and interventions that aren't bureaucratic. So we need to facilitate, for example, easy, real-time processes
Yeah.
which are really going to kind of enhance that sort of the data literacy, the agency, the sense that our learners are actually experiencing something that's kind of effortless, and that fosters the agency, as opposed to I can't get this thing to work, you know.
Yeah.
I'm giving up. I've had enough. It's not what we want.
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that. Yeah.
And I suppose the other thing is, how do you maintain agency and engagement in a flexible environment? And my sense is again that, you know, in the old world, in person, when you're in a room, it's a relational thing. It's about being in close proximity to others. It's about the interaction you have within that community that you're sitting within. Yeah, I mean, how do we create and foster that same sense of interaction, engagement, lively discussion, and so forth through different mixed modes and flexible modes of learning? And I think we've just got to think about things through a completely new lens. So I think I have a kaleidoscope behind me, and I think it's a metaphor for all the ideas that this topic has generated.
Oh, and it's a really fantastic picture behind you. I think it does demonstrate that. Thank you, Sheila. Um, can I ask you about how how you're identifying and what your thoughts are about systems for rewarding and recognizing credit from other higher education providers and maybe from employers as well?
I think the first thing that I thought of when I looked at this question was parity of esteem. I think one of the biggest risks that we experience is when our own community don't attach the real value and worth to a particular approach just because it's not the one that they knew and grew up with, or it's the one that they feel most comfortable practicing. And I really want us to address that parity of esteem question first and foremost, because if we believe in our offer and the quality of our offer, and we want our learners to invest in it and be valued for having pursued it, then parity of esteem is paramount. We must have that front and centre. And I think these offers must be valued and not seen as lower quality. And there must be a value to the individual and society. Really important to get that across. I'm going to keep going back to my theme of agility. I think agility has to be an underpinning principle for everything that we do from here onwards. We're talking about flexibility in learning, and if we're not agile in terms of our processes, our systems, how we recognise and reward activities, then that isn't going to help. So for me, it's about the need to have simple processes which facilitate all of these activities across multiple providers. We could be in all kinds of partnerships, alliances, be engaged with industry and employers. So that multiplicity also lends a complexity. So simplicity has to be at the heart of our processes. I also want to sort of build a sense of community. And I think this sort of harks back to my first point, which is how do we build communities of shared interest where there's a clear sense of shared endeavour? And I think that we need to create that with our multiplicity of providers and across our learners, and fundamentally within our own institutions. There has to be that sense of shared endeavour, otherwise we won't achieve the ambitious goals that we've set out. And I think what we need to do is persuade our own staff about the value of these qualifications, rewarding them for engaging in successful delivery of these changes. That's what's going to make them value being participants and being really key players in this whole piece.
It's to me, it's really hearing your answer. It's really about embedding partnership buildings partnership building into academic practice, that it's part of what we do in academia as an academic in our discipline. It's part of that. It's an integrated part of that. So that's really fun. Yeah, so thank you very much for that answer, Sheila. For the next question, we have oh, it leads straight on to the next one. Actually, it's about partnering to the extent about establishing the partnering with other organisations and open education providers. So working with others. So it'd be great to hear your view about those partnerships.
Janet, thank you. When I looked at this, this question, I also considered a question around establishing the extent and use of partnering for social and economic mobility. And I saw I saw both these questions being sort of integrated and very much related to one another. And I suppose it sort of generated a whole range of questions in my own mind. And perhaps one of the first ones I thought about was the real need to achieve culture change in terms of how faculty engage with and buy into these changes, because it is a completely new mindset. We are asking people to really park things that they cherish and which has defined their careers, particularly for mid and more advanced career people. Perhaps less so for early career people. So I think a significant culture change has to form part of the consideration here. And I've talked a lot in this interview about needing to have a wide range of different competencies across a multiplicity of fields. So the other thought that occurred to me is, as institutions, as universities, do we need to consider, for example, further categories of staff who specialise in these different areas? Is there a hybrid role that we need to conceive? Are there hybrid contracts that we need to consider? Are we being too rigid in terms of only looking at successful delivery, being able to be delivered through that which we already have? So I think we've probably got to be quite all-encompassing in opening our minds to those new opportunities as well. And I think it also engenders for me new implications for integrated governance and leadership to ensure that we've got strategic integration across all these activities. Because if we're going to make all these things work, the education side, the commercial side, the financial modelling, the planning and resources, that has to be part of an overarching integrated approach where each understands the other. We might have amazing educational quality in terms of our provision, but if that isn't speaking to the partnering and the social mobility aspects, then it's not going to work. So that from the outset, we've got to have that integrated governance and leadership model. I also think we've got to be really sharp and smart about engaging with governments, really conveying and reinforcing the new roles for universities as part of economic and social engines for change and societal improvement. What I think would be a terrible missed opportunity is for governments to continue to see us in a rather narrow conception, which is traditional and frankly already out of date, but it's still the well-held conception, unfortunately. We've got to break that, and I think this is a really amazing opportunity for us to sort of demonstrate that we are those new engines. And I think in terms of marketing our offer to new cohorts of students, those who've never traditionally thought of universities as for them, and this is where the social mobility aspect comes in particularly. You know, we need to be seen as providers of the types of education that they are seeking, and that we can provide it to them on their own terms. Because I sense is they think 3-year undergraduate degree programme, or, you know, I can't even consider it. So again, I think to these two questions, it's creating a new vision of the quality and value of flexible modes of education, and playing that into those different stakeholder groups. And I think we need to then be very, very clear in explaining why it is vital to have these modes to improve social mobility, diversity and inclusion. And therefore, you know, really tapping into a wider, much more flexible talent pool across society. And that's where I think we can really have impact and make a valuable change.
Absolutely. And it really leads nicely onto my final question, which is about the use of partnering for social and economic mobility, which really builds on what you're saying there.
So again, I mean, I think it is very much about getting those partners to understand that universities are not perhaps the organisations that they previously conceived us as being, and that this would be very much an equitable partnership, that we want to learn from them as much as saying that we are sources of knowledge and sort of advancement. And I think we perhaps don't engage with industry and business partners as much as we have, as much as we should. And I think we really need to accelerate that notion that the quality of what we do, the relevance of what we do, is significantly enhanced through building those partnerships with industry. And I think one of the things that we haven't necessarily been able to convince people of is that universities are not elitist. Even though we have so many people coming and studying with us from all walks of life, I think that perception is still there. So we need to think about how we bring people in to be part of the offer, and for them to be co-partners in sharing that message, marketing the message, and just being a core part of how we can convey what we have to offer. And I think we've got to move away from, science is delivered in white lab coats and laboratories, and that, in the arts and humanities, we have a very particular conception of what a professor looks like. Well, I think things are changing, but genuinely, to build that sense of social mobility, having a very vibrant, diverse representatives from across our community being real ambassadors and advocates for why social mobility and social change is possible, that they have been successful products of our system, and that there are others who can also really benefit. So I think a really strong, powerful vision for the future is what we need to build.
Thank you very much, Sheila. You've really demonstrated the project titles around flexible ecosystems, and you've shown us the breadth and the width of what the ecosystem actually has to be. Its ecosystem includes the strategy, the job profiles, it's everything, and the partners. And so it's really, thank you for all your answers. You've given us a really good sense of that breadth there. So thank you very much, Sheila.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you very much indeed.